Hello, everyone. Welcome to Automation Hour. And let's advance the slides. Okay. All right, if you are joining us for the first time, all lines are muted. Please post any questions that you have to our Trailblazer Community Salesforce Automation Hour. And sometime after the session, we will post the link to the recording as well as the deck. It'll be available on our YouTube channel, Salesforce Automation Hour, on our website, automationhour.com, and then we'll also post out on our Trailblazer Community Salesforce Automation Hour. And if you haven't signed up for the automation hours that we have booked out through the rest of the year, I highly encourage you to do so. We actually have Parker coming back on August 14th. And we have our very own Rakesh presenting on October 23rd. So I want to highlight that. And even if you can't join us live, you'll get a link to the recording after the fact. And I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Concrete.io, because without them, we cannot bring you this awesome free webinar series. And here are your co-hosts, David, Rakesh, and myself. And we're very excited to have Parker back on. He spoke a couple of weeks ago, and then you saw he'll speak in the next couple of weeks. So we're just going to keep having Parker back because we like him. So with that, let me hand it over to Parker.
Okie doke. Well, it's good to have you all back again. Definitely looking forward to presenting today and again in August. And so definitely enjoy doing automation hour and public speaking and all that. You know, most of you probably already know me. So I'm an independent Salesforce consultant, been doing that for about 2 years. I have 11 certifications. Presented twice now on automation hour already. Once on Dreamforce on certifications. If you want to get more certifications but don't know how or want to know more about getting them, check out this link here. I do an entire detail on how to get certifications quickly. Over here, picture me at Dreamforce on the top floor of Salesforce Tower. Fun fact, just write a lot of flows, automation in day-to-day job. Also happen to be a board game enthusiast, and ironically, there is a board game called Pandemic right now, and so that's getting a lot of popularity given the current times. And so if you're looking for something to do in off hours that's kind of on theme with what's going on in the world, go check that out. That's a Pandemic board game. It's a cooperative game where you fight disease across the entire world and save the world. So you can check out my socials here below, and let's get into it today. So as you know, we will be talking about multi-select pick lists. Now then, why would we be talking about multi-select pick lists? Usually they aren't a very good choice of fields. You know, there's even a meme out there by the famous Steve Mo. Every time you use a multi-select pick list field, the baby seal is clubbed to death. So think of the baby seals and use checkboxes, dependent pick lists, or junction objects. And so when we use multi-select pick lists, oftentimes it messes with our reporting, it messes with our metrics, it doesn't automate well, validation rules stop working, everything, you know, has a tendency to go awry when you use multi-select pick lists sometimes. However, there is one use case that I've come up with where multi-select pick lists are actually good to use, and that is to create junction objects. And the advantage of junction objects over multi-select pick lists are pretty darn good. When you use junction objects, you can report on them very easily. You can store a lot of information about those individual values on its own record, and you can keep it in a very nice format for when you're working with. You can automate it, you can roll up summary on it, you can assign those records, you can create tasks or whatever. You know, junction objects are very powerful, very flexible, and you know, they're just so much better to use than multi-select pick lists. But one of the problems with using junction objects is they are kind of hard to create. And if you are going to be using a finite set of records, like for example, you want to create one record for every country, but every country, may or may not be applicable, or say there's a series of tasks you want to create for a given campaign, but they're not always the same, you can use a multi-select pick list to choose which ones that you want, and then use the values that your user selects to create junction object records off of this. And this is great. It's user friendly. They don't have to create one record for every country or task or other widget that they want to create. They just, select the values that they want, shove them over into the multi-select pick list. Voila, Salesforce takes care of the rest of it. What's more is you can keep it configurable. My problem is we're using multi-select pick lists. And when we use multi-select pick list, it can get a little complicated. So we're going to go through some automation today. I've got 3 scenarios prepared that I want to walk you guys through and demonstrate how to work with multi-select pick lists in Salesforce. And so one of the things that we can do, and let's get into the demo. So let's just go through a very basic setup. We've got a custom object here, and we'll just create a new record for this. I have here a multi-select pick list with various different colors, just keeping it pretty simple. And depending on if I choose some of them, it will create a custom object, custom junction object. As you can see, we have some in there, but I've also affixed some additional properties to these. Notice that I gave a number here. This could very well easily be, for example, a checkbox. Perhaps it could be an assignee. Maybe you want John to do task 1 and Jane to do the other task. So you can set up any kind of properties. And what I've done here is I've used a custom metadata type to generate these, but I could have just as easily have linked them to an actual custom object. So you can use a custom metadata type or a custom object for when you create these things. It really doesn't matter. It depends on what you want to do with it. Now then, one thing to know is with multi-select pick lists, you are a little limited on what you can do. You can have 1,000 pick list values total, but your user can only ever select 100 at a time. So if that's going to be a limiting factor, you're going to want to look at another solution. To be fair, another possible way of solving this scenario is by using Apex and Visualforce, but we're admins here most likely, and I'm just going to throw that out there. You can probably also use Lightning components. It doesn't really matter, but as an admin, it's great to be able to configure this with flow, and we're going to do that here today. So I have a flow, and I've called it color creator. And so let's just take a look at this flow, open it up, and see how it works. So how did we get these junction object records to create? So I have a custom metadata type set up, and so let's find that in setup, and let's see what that looks like. So we got custom metadata types in setup. And if you're not familiar with custom metadata types, I strongly recommend that you get familiar with them because they are very powerful. They are basically like a custom object that lives in setup, so you can deploy individual records. And so for every color that we have available, we have a color here, and each color I've ascribed a number to. Again, I could very easily have assigned a person here, a checkbox, another property, a due date, etc. And so what we're doing here is we're basically getting all of them, all the records. And so this got set up so ID is not equal to empty string. Basically it exists. I could have just as easily used that. Don't need to sort them. Again, we're getting all the records, and so that's going to be put into a collection. Salesforce is going to automatically create that collection variable for us. If you want to be a little bit more precise and just choose the fields that you get, you can do that here. Not usually a big deal, seeing as how with a custom metadata type, you're probably going to want to get all the fields anyways. So then for every custom metadata type record, and again, if you have a lot of custom metadata type records, you might not, this solution might not work for you. If you have hundreds or thousands even, it's probably not going to work because we're going to hit some limits. So just a fair warning on that. But most people, I've only ever seen 100, maybe 200 at a time. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. We have our collection variable. This is a metadata type record, and it collects. So this was our collection variable from our query. And I've just called this color loop here, our loop variable. So the first thing to do is when we have this color, we need to figure out, all right, did our user select that? And so we have this variable, MSP input. That's short for multi-select picklist input. What this is our multi-select picklist that we defined here. And it's actually going to look pretty much like this. You got yellow, colon, green. If I had added more here, we're going to have more colons and more spaces. And that's pretty much the format that they're saved in Flow. You can kind of think of them as a collection or a text or a collection of text in some cases. So what we're doing here is we have this big string, yellow, blue, green, black, all separated by colons. And we're going to see if it contains our current color. And as you know, in our custom metadata type, that's going to be a value like black. So if it contains the value black, which here it is true, then we're going to evaluate yes. If it doesn't contain it, we're just going to go back to the loop and repeat this process. So if the answer is yes, so it is in our custom metadata type and it's in our pick list that the user specified, we're going to create a junction object record. So first things first, we get the ID of the custom object test that we had. So that way they show up in the related list here. Always need to specify that. Then we can go on and fix any properties, whether it belongs to another custom object, who it's assigned to, other properties, text values, numbers, due dates, whatever. And that's what we're doing here. The name we have specified as belonging to the label, number corresponds to number, and done. Then we add that record to a collection. So we got our new color here that we just created up in the assignment, put that in a variable, done. Go back to the loop, repeat the process until you're done. Then we simply say, all right, Salesforce, I found all the records that we want to create. Here they are. Put them in the database for me. We're done. Obviously, we're going to kick all that off through Process Builder. Could just as easily have used an after-save flow with all the new types of flows coming out. You know, just keep those in mind when you create things. For the most part, I continue to use Process Builder. I don't know enough about after-save flows personally, and there are some things that after-save flows don't do that Process Builder still does. So keep best practices in mind and how you want to set your organization up when choosing which trigger to fire. So that's scenario one. So if we want to do something a little bit more complex though, I have another scenario where we work with multi-select pick lists in another way. So I have, and this was something I built for a real client out in the wild, an object called a credit limit. So basically you can kind of think an insurance scenario here where individual companies have individual limits for various things that they're doing. It's been a little while since I've been into the details of all of it, but you know, sometimes they have a number of different countries that they want to apply it to. And if it's not a country that they specified here, it's just not going to apply. And so every now and then they have a need to change, like add or remove one of these countries. And so while we're not going to be creating a junction object, it's also, this is good insight into how multi-select pick lists work in Flow. If I create one of these credit limit changes to add a country, I can specify my credit limit that I just created, and I can add some new countries. This won't create any records per se, but I could if I wanted to. And this will actually add those to the credit limit that I have already created. Voila, go to my credit limit. And as you can see, the new countries are there. So this is going to take advantage of a different type of loop and different type of style. So we're just going to open this up, take a little look. This is not the flow that I want. No, this is the flow that I want. That's the next one. So first things first, we're going to pass in our multi-select pick list. So we got new countries, no brackets equals multi-select value, no brackets. So before I explain what this means, let me just backtrack, and again, we'll show how multi-select pick lists look and flow. So multi-select pick list, you know, we got blue, green, red, you know, that's how it shows up in Salesforce. But in Flow, it actually looks a little different. You have brackets around the end of it, like that. So it looks pretty much like a collection. It's also going to be a string. So it's going to have quotes around it as well in certain cases. So that's how it's going to look. I don't know, save that. And so that's what this formula does. And I actually got most of this logic from one of David Litton's blog posts, if you want to check that out. So this formula here basically says, all right, we're going to take out all the white space, going to substitute our countries that we just put in. This is the original multi-select pick list. Going to substitute the bracket for blank space, going to take out all the white space and add a semicolon on the end. Then we have an existing countries collection. So what this collection is the countries that we've already identified from the, let's see here. Yeah, so the existing countries is what we are passing in. That's what already exists on the credit limit, not the credit limit change. And so this grab left value gets the first value of the credit limit change country. So that's going to be, for example, Andorra here. If it already contains that Andorra, then the country is not new. Otherwise, it's a new country. And we're going to add that to a multi-select pick list. So we're going to add item, grab left value. So that's that new value. We're just going to add that to our list of existing countries, so that way we can put it on the credit limit. In either case, we don't want to see that value again. So we are going to take the remaining multi-select pick list values, and what this does is it's everything, or it basically removes that first value of the multi-select pick list and assigns it back to those new countries, no brackets. So we've kind of created our own for loop here. So this decision asks, all right, do we have another value that we need to consider? In other words, is there still a value from here that we need to take a look at? So once we execute this the first time, this first cycle of logic, we're going to be left with Angola, Antigua and Barbuda, and Argentina. Execute again, we're going to be left with just the last two. One more time, just Argentina. And then finally, we're going to have nothing, at which case this then becomes false, and we go on to update our credit limit. If it is true, we go up here, execute all this, and then once we're done, we will again construct our credit limit. So again, always specify the ID. Going to update the countries to our new countries here. Existing countries is now a collection of both the countries that we already had, plus the unique countries that were specified on our credit limit change request. Also include a process builder bypass date time here. So if you didn't tune in from the last session, this just bypasses some validation rules. There were a lot of them, and so just need to make sure that we didn't hit any errors when we did this, because only certain people were allowed to update the credit limit at certain times. And when you approve one of these credit limit changes, it kind of broke a few rules around who was able to edit it and who wasn't. So we had to bypass that. So there's a little extra on how to update multi-select pick lists and how to work with them in process automation. And so there is that, and we've already seen that there. Have our credit limit changes. So if we go to the contract that we have this against, we will see a related list with a bunch of covered countries. Once again, these are our junction objects. So for all the covered countries that we just specified on that credit limit, we now have a covered country record here. Every time that pick list is updated, we get a new junction object record here. And that is another flow that we have. It's actually this flow. Now that this one is a little bit more complicated, because not only are we looking at records from one credit limit, we're looking at records from multiple credit limits. So we can't just simply create new junction objects willy-nilly, because they're not actually related to the credit limit. They're more related to the contract than anything else. So we can't, so if I create a new credit limit belonging to this contract and I specify US as a country, I can't just create a new US record. I have to see if it already exists. So this flow troubleshoots that problem and first finds the existing countries. So we're going to look at the covered countries, finds the contract. So we want to find all the covered countries that equal the contract ID. Not going to bother sorting them, we're going to take them all, and we really just need to know what country it belongs to. So we just specified that field for efficiency's sake. Next, we're going to loop through all the countries. We got our existing country loop variable. We just want a collection of all the countries, so that way we can do the same kind of logic that we did earlier in our first flow. Next, we're going to do what we did in our second flow and remove the brackets again. And once again, here's where we get a little interesting here. So we have our existing countries as a text collection. We're going to see if it contains the first value of our credit limit. And if it does, then we're simply going to remove it and return back to our first decision. If it does not, then we will create a new covered country for it. So this is a little bit more involved, and this time we're specifying some additional properties. We have our new covered country, temporary variable, and so we have a bunch of different properties that we're setting, the most important of which is the contract ID. We always need to make sure that we specify the contract ID so it show up in this related list. This here, grab left value, shows us which country it actually is. So you kind of need to put that in there. And then this is just some values that we had on the contract. So we can pull those in and specify those on there. They're going to go into the claims waiting period, co-insurance, blah, blah, blah. So we finished that. Then we're going to add this into the collection of stuff to insert. So we're always going to want to make sure we do that here. And once we have our collection, we're going to remove that value and then continue iterating again. If we have another value, then we'll create it again. If not, then we'll just go to insert the new country. So let's see that in action. The trigger for this is if we have our contract, so we have 10 different countries right now. And we go to create a new credit limit. Just throw that in there. Got to populate a bunch of different fields for everything. Forget what validation rows are in place off the top of my head. Voila. So let's put in some different countries here, lots of different countries. Putting them out there. Throw that in there, and then mark this as approved. Why? Because we are the approver. So we got a whole bunch of different buyer countries. Now, if we go back to the contract, we now have a total of 37 different covered countries. And you can see that the new ones that we created have some properties off of that were created from the credit limit that we just made. So there is that. Those are the 3 scenarios, and those are how we can create junction object records or pretty much anything really off of multi-select pick lists. So short and sweet, but let's just do a little review here. So there's 2 different ways that you can go about it. You can just loop through metadata types and see if they contain the values that you've selected. If not, then no worries. Then you can just go through here. The other way that you can do it, and it depends on which way you have to do it in some cases, is to break down the multi-select pick list and take off the brackets and start iterating over the values like we've seen here and there. So with that, we can go on to some Q&A if you like.
All right. For folks, as a reminder, if you have any questions, please post to the Trailblazer Community Salesforce Automation Hour. And let me see if we have any questions. And it could be a question related to Parker's presentation or any general process automation question that you may have.
Ask us anything. Ask me anything.
AMA.
AMA. So yeah, it can be related to this thing, talk about certifications, talk about Apex, talk about whatever you want.
All right, so I'm not seeing any questions on the Trailblazer community. Kathy Zimmerman says, I'll just say thank you.
Yes, all right.
So while we give folks a few minutes, Parker, can you tell me how you got involved with automation? I know you were pretty heavily involved in the Trailblazer community, now also on Slack. So how did you learn Process Builder and Flow?
Good question. So this kind of goes back to just my overarching story. I got my start on Trailhead, like pretty much everyone does nowadays. And the backstory behind that is my dad was actually a Salesforce employee. And so he got me started on there, and I got to looking around on things and came across the process automation module. And up to that point, it's probably one of the hardest modules to take because there's just so many moving parts going on. So eventually did the module, but then I stumbled across what was then the developer forums. And the funny thing is, the developer forums don't really have exclusively developer questions. Some of them talk about flows and processes. And what I started doing was just taking a look at those flow and process builder questions and start answering them. So I got better and better at flows and processes through that. Sometimes they would come up with crazy stuff, and sometimes, I was able to figure it out using flow and process builder, and then did the same thing in the communities and now in Slack.
Yeah, and at what age did you start?
What age did I start? So I started taking Trailhead badges at the age of 13. So I probably started doing that when I was about 14.
That's crazy. All right. Dominic has a question. What's your next certification that you're planning for?
I am planning to go up the system architect path, and so I believe the next one is deployment lifecycle and designer manager, whatever it is. I forget at the moment. I was studying for a bit for Dreamforce, and then Dreamforce finally hit to actually talk about certifications instead of study for them, and then just 2020. So I'll be taking that pretty soon, though, I think.
All right. Cynthia asks, would you prefer working with files or attachments in Flow?
I don't think it really matters in Flow. As far as I know, I believe both of them are still use the content document link, and they're both situated relatively in the same object. So as far as Flow is concerned, I don't know that it matters. However, as far as best practice is concerned, attachments have been superseded by files. So I would definitely prefer files just because best practice. If anything, files probably have better flow support.
Okay. Just to note for folks, yes, we are recording the session and it will be available on automationhour.com, on our YouTube channel, and in our Salesforce Automation Hour Trailblazer community once it's posted. All right, Marco asks, can we review these solutions on a website like Automation Hour site, or does Parker have these solutions publicly available?
I don't have the solution publicly available. I can, however, make my generic solution public and provide an unmanaged package link for that if you like. As far as the other solutions, I would probably have to make those a little bit more generic and then publish those in that format, because what I've done that I just showed today was pretty tailored to something that we did for a client. So I would have to remove all those dependencies to make that public.
Mm-hmm. Great. Stephen asks, could you explain why you didn't use a loop for the second two examples?
Why did I not use a loop? I kind of manufactured my own loop from that, but let's just take a look at this. And so what we are trying to do, yeah, so why did I not use a loop here? Because we have the existing countries. Bracket. So what I was trying to do most likely is just loop through the picklist values that we actually used. Could I have done the same thing here as I did here and just loop through the metadata types? Probably. I think it's a matter of preference. Honestly, I think this is probably a bit less complicated. But to answer your question, I don't think that there's any particular reason where or why I would not use it. Well, in this one, take that back. Yeah, I actually could have done a loop through here and instead see, all right, first, is that contained in the already existing one? If true, then just return. If it's contained in the new collection, the updated collection, then just return or then move on and add it. So yes, I could have done a loop. Why did I not use a loop? I can't think of a good reason off the top of my head. I probably built this almost 2 years ago, and so this design worked. It may not be the simplest design, but it did work, and so you're welcome to use either format. I don't see any preference for one over the other. I think they're both about as effective, although this one's probably a bit more preferable for the simplicity of it.
All right, as a reminder to folks, if you have a question for Parker on his presentation or any type of question, whether it's automation, certification, what have you, Salesforce related, post your questions out on the Salesforce Automation Hour Trailblazer community. So we'll see if anybody else has some last questions here. So while we wait, what would be a summer 20 feature that you're looking forward to putting into use, automation related?
Automation related. It's a good question. I'm kind of fascinated by the rollback debugging that we have here. I'll be interested in experimenting with that. It must not be on a summer 20 or no, I'm still on spring here. Summer 20 automation, but yeah, the rollback debugging is fairly interesting. The after save flows are going to be a game changer, I think. I don't think that they're 100% ready yet because of the fact that Process Builder still has the handy idea of saying, let's just show it here. The advanced criteria of do you want to execute the actions only when specified changes are made to the record. I toggle this on just about every node that I do, and recreating that logic in Flow is not something that I would particularly look forward to doing. So after save flows are definitely great. You know, they move up in the hierarchy and you can get rid of process builder, which frankly is somewhat clunky in cases. But yeah, I definitely am looking forward to seeing where that goes.
Yeah.
They can make it easier and give access to the basically the equivalent of trigger.old, then that would be phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking about it a bit with David last time here, and apparently there is a way. I just haven't been able to find it, and I haven't had the need to do it quite yet. How about you, Jen?
Definitely looking at the after save record change, just because I like one automation tool and I like Flow better, much better than having to build processes.
Right. Yeah, consolidation is definitely good because if we can get to where we exclusively use Flow and don't have to have a workflow or process builder, then I think that there might be a better learning curve on all of it for sure.
But I like the fact that they're making incremental improvements to make Flow Builder easier to use. Like, for example, you won't need to create a loop variable every time you have a loop.
Right. I'm in a spring org, otherwise I could show that. But yeah, the idea is that you wouldn't have to automate this, or you wouldn't have to actually create a variable there. It just does it for you. And so I actually, when I created this flow in my developer edition here for this presentation, I was kind of bummed that it wasn't there. Because because I definitely like having it create the variables for me, even if I don't automatically store all fields, which really isn't best practice, in my opinion. But just even selecting this, it still creates the variable for me, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm. All right, I have refreshed the Trailblazer community several times, and I do not see any new questions come in.
No new question. No one else in GoToMeeting? Got any questions?
And all right, so we'll do last call. Last call, folks.
Let's go. Let's take a look at their HANA Slack too, just in case there's anything there. Alrighty. Processes, flows, workflow rules. No.
And so if folks missed out on Parker's presentation a couple of weeks ago on how to bypass validation rules and duplicate rules, I highly recommend watching that. I was telling Parker before we started that I actually put that into work in my org today, because I had something where I had automation running behind the scenes, and then there was a validation rule and my flow faulted. So thanks to Parker.
There's your solution. Yeah. I've seen several people use that in the HANA Slack, and so Randy Thompson especially has been evangelizing that idea there. So props to her. And yeah, it's definitely something that I think about every admin will be able to take advantage of sooner or later as they add validation rules to their org and add processes. Eventually, the two are just going to collide, and there's really not much you can do about it. However, there is a trick to get around it.
All right, so with that, we're not gonna keep you any longer, but we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
All right, yeah.
All right, thanks everybody for
So
joining
if
today.
there's anything you guys want me to talk about next month, then just let me know and I can demo a solution for you.
Great. All right, we'll be talking to you, Parker.
All righty, thank you much. Catch you later, John.
All right, bye.
Bye.